Good morning. And of course, some a few housekeeping items for us before we probably start. There's a fire exit that if there's an alarm, just to make sure that you make your way down. Since we do have a Q&A, we will look to integrate the Q&A audience as much as we can. Sorry, the online audience as much as we can. We're putting microphone on the website or anyone who has a question, then we would like to ask that question. And other than that, we hope that you enjoy the breakfast. Sorry for the slight hiccups today with the start, but I hope that everybody's fun out. So today's session is about EU battery regulation and the battery passport. And of course, we are here in Cape Town for the start of the mining Nguéyanouba, support the conference for Africa's mining sector. And what we want to discuss is both the challenges that come with the implementation of activities that are specifically to meetings and compliance requirements, but of course also the opportunities and the potential benefits for the African market. And SLR and RCS Global have put on this event together as RCS Global is the leading responsible sourcing solutions provider and a partner to key downstream as well as upstream companies in the battery raw materials supply chain. And SLR, of course, is Africa's largest specialist sustainability consulting company. And since last year, RCS Global is SLR Consulting's responsible sourcing division. As a result, brought some of the most some people from our teams together to ensure that so this topic, of course, is very pertinent for Cape Town. For those of you who have not been here yet, please do make a point of not only spending your entire week in the conference venue, do it out there. We have the most beautiful beaches, wonderful mountain, and incredible biodiversity in this environment. And of course, there could be not a better place as a result to discuss pertinent ESG issues today. And with the key, often European and other overseas sort of destinations-driven compliance requirements that we're seeing that are being introduced, of course, we're now getting to a point where deadlines for implementation are nearing, and the thought processes, the strategizing, etc., on the African continent is also accelerating with a view to looking at how do we position ourselves vis-a-vis these requirements and how do we capitalize on them to the best of our ability, and of course, how do we do that in a sufficient manner. And with that said, let me introduce our distinguished panel today. First of all, myself, very briefly, I'm a co-founder of RCS Global. I have been working in responsible sourcing for about 20 years. In fact, an incredible career advising many of the relevant companies that work in the battery raw material space, and I also serve on the Energy Limited Sustainability Council. Now, we're very privileged to have also representatives from key parts of the industry today. Let me first introduce Johannes Danz. Johannes is not only a real pleasure to work with, he is also a key voice in the industry. Johannes is the project coordinator for sustainable supply chains, human rights, and raw materials at Mercedes-Benz AG. Mercedes is also a long-standing strategic partner of RCS. Prior to his current role, Johannes led projects in international development in the extractive sector in Africa, and was also an advisor to the German government. And he also has a degree from medicine in London. So do I. So welcome. We have also Stefan Crets. Stefan is the executive director of CSR Europe, a position he's held since February 2011. So it's a bit of an anniversary for you. CSR Europe brings together over 10,000 companies with the aim to support business and industry sectors in their transformation and collaboration towards sustainable competitiveness and sustainable growth. And also CSR Europe, very importantly, facilitates the global automotive initiative to drive sustainability. And I'll say about that. Then let me introduce my African colleagues. Manu Nguéyanouba is the head of Better Mining at RCS Global. Better Mining is a key boots on the ground effort that is driving impact in the ASM sectors across the African continent. And Manu is a leading ASM expert and a responsible mineral trade specialist. He's advised industrial mining on ASM management plans, as well as the DRC government, industry, in co-creation and monitoring of conflict-free supply chains and certification processes. Other African participant, David Mercer. Hi, David. David is a top energy expert and the principal energy engineer at Stefan. David has 2 decades of global experience working on key energy projects across the industrial, commercial, and civil sectors. And he has assisted all types of corporations on energy efficiency strategy and large-scale energy management projects. And very interestingly, David has developed an energy efficiency strategy both for South Africa itself and for the city of Durban. So welcome, David. Thanks for adding your expertise to the panel. Then last but definitely not least, Dr. Iain Fraser. Iain is the head of the digital solutions team at RCS Global Group, which is one of the most advanced developers and offers of digital solutions for the evolving sustainability, regulatory compliance, and sustainability that includes the battery passport. Prior to joining RCS Global, Iain successfully contributed to the central sustainability strategy for another one of RCS Global's strategic OEM partners, Volkswagen Group. And Iain brings a wealth of experience also for the consulting sector, having worked with Accenture in 2015, and he also holds a PhD in sustainability and supply chain management. So welcome, Iain. Now, in the first sort of part of the panel, we're going to discuss really the challenges. We're going to start with the challenges and really lead the discussion into the opportunities and the potential benefits of this. And so the larger overarching question is really, what are the implications of downstream requirements for responsible sourcing, focusing, of course, on the EU battery regulation, and why does this matter to everyone? And as a sort of scene-setting element, I would like to invite Iain just to give us a brief overview of the EU battery regulation and its relevance to the discussion.
Thanks, Nick. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many people here of this exciting week, and thank you very much for taking time out of what's no doubt a busy schedule. The EU battery regulation is fair to say is a major driver in the industry right now. And whilst the specific scope of, I would say, the focus of the requirements of the EU battery regulation is clearly on the economic operators that want to put batteries onto the EU market. What's also very clear from a reading of the legislation is that these requirements will cascade back through global supply chains for core battery electric vehicle materials. And so that's why we're here today. So as Nick pointed out, we have a background in this space looking at the different raw materials. going from the upstream producers down through the processes and refiners and midstream to the downstream. And it's great to have representatives here on the panel from different parts, particularly from the downstream, to sort of help understand where these requirements are coming from and what that means practically. However, the battery regulation stipulates that by 2027, there will be a battery passport attached to all batteries. Now, that is still some years away. However, if you look at the data requirements that come out of this legislation, it's quite clear that already in 2025, downstream companies need to have carbon footprint data from all of the different stages of their value chains, and they have to have solid due diligence proofs. This means a certificate about the due diligence that they have been taking on the entirety of the raw materials that go into the batteries. So this is a fairly ambitious undertaking, to put it politely. And although 2027 sounds like it's still some years away, really the first requirements in terms of the work that companies need to do engaging their mid and upstream supply chains begins now, actually yesterday. Yeah. So this is why it's great to get Nguéyanouba, because the challenge is also at the same time an opportunity. Those producers and those players in the value chain that understand the requirements that are going to be facing all materials that need to enter the European market, and are able to get certified, produce data on their operations and their production that is in line with the battery passport requirements, will have an opportunity to positively differentiate themselves and basically support those downstream companies being conformed with the EU battery regulation. So it's I think, yeah, a mammoth undertaking. If you consider that one downstream company will have hundreds of different suppliers just for these four raw materials as stipulated by the regulation, then the sort of coordination work, the data, the ability to obtain that data, to certify that data, to put it together into a battery passport is really quite an undertaking. And I think it's important to understand that for those producers on the African continent, this is the sort of data that is going to be expected of them from their buyers and buyers' buyers. So I think that hopefully provides a little bit of a context in terms of what the regulation requires of us. And for my part, it's fascinating to see the developments that are taking place in international forums such as the Global Battery Alliance or TNAX, looking at the automotive space. I'm looking forward to hearing about the considerations from drive sustainability, and looking forward to engaging with lots of people to speak about the role of mining in the future battery passport.
Well, yeah, thanks for setting the scene for our discussion. Brought up some very important points there already. And next, I would like to ask Johannes for an OEM's perspective. How do you see the influence of downstream requirements on upstream practices? And perhaps you could offer some insights on the engagement with mining operators in Africa, and your perspective on the issue. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for that. I mean, just looking back into the last, 3 to 5 years, and just reflecting if there has been a change in conversation, for me that is always something that is very visible. Then I would definitely say yes, there has been a change, right? So the conversations that we have about direct supplies with possible clients are fundamentally different to what they used to be 3 or 5 years ago. There's a lot of expertise and there's a lot more awareness for a broad spectrum of sustainability issues, and that means not just looking at whatever makes front page, right? Child labor and materials kind of issues, but more broadly set up. And that is certainly an improvement. And I also think that it's some coincidence in that at least partially comes from our acting as OEMs. And that's obviously the Mercedes, but that is, both of them, particularly those that are organized within drive sustainability. What certainly is the question of requirements. So at some point there needs to be a contract, a code of conduct that sets out what there needs to be in place in the supply chain. This is tremendously important, and that is the start of everything. It's not sufficient though. I would say that what happened to raise these two additional points that from our perspective are super important and have contributed to that change in the capacity, capability of suppliers. One is direct engagement. So we do run a risk screening onto our suppliers where we analyze how far they have advanced in building their technology management systems. And once the supplier comes up, from our people that we engage and see where the issues lie and how we can help to improve that system so that the entire supply chain becomes strong and that's the goal that we have today. And then I think what also has changed tremendously is the level of guidance and information and of help out there that really support suppliers on their way. Two things that I'd like to mention. One is the raw material output, which I probably will talk about more in depth. That is a fantastic resource for knowledge on raw material specific risk that has been put out there. It's also a collaborative action of the overall industry. And it's available to everybody that really wants to look into these things. And of course, a particular target group that is small and mid-sized companies that do not have necessarily the capacities to run that kind of research on the road. And something we published last year in November is a guidance on standards and quality criteria standards and what to look out for. And it's a question that we receive on a regular basis from our suppliers. So yeah, there's a lot of one. I think the last point that available guidance, available trainings, that is something that can further improve in a way. But we definitely do see that there has been a change already, and now that's right to strengthen that a little further and develop that into partnerships that hold the system together.
Thank you so much, Johannes. Insights there. And of course, as we move into the opportunities discussion later on, we can also discuss some of the take up of some of this newly available material. Now, Manu, you are here representing and working in the part of the sector, part of that mining sector, that is often been somewhat difficult to include in some of these discussions, especially just on small scale. And before we deep dive further into the industrial side of things, and of course, the more formalized part of the discussion is going to you, Johannes, to provide some perspective on the importance of the role of this and the importance of inclusion. So,
great. Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. This type of conversation, when they have been other circumstances, where I didn't have a chance to sit here and meet all of you guys and speak about the work we do on the upstream side of the supply chain for raw materials originating from the conflict affects and high standards. And so I'm very happy that I'm here. It's been 10 years since we started better mining, working in the DRC, Rwanda, and now progressively extending to Madagascar, supporting mine operators, ensuring that we meet the expectations when it comes to ESG risks and mitigate them to demonstrate that there is compliance in the materials that we produce and we trade in the upstream side of the supply chains. So it's good that I can see many places here that are already working with better mining in a single basis. The work that better mining does, serving you as a gateway to accessing data, business data, to allow you to be able to meet your current requirements. This is mainly by engaging with mining operators on basin sites, collects incidents during the different stages of material trade. So starting from the extraction, processing, the trading, there is a variety of risks that usually create anxiety and worries, and sometimes it's not sure if this is the best way of doing business, and it leads to misunderstanding. But better mining being present on the site offers you direct access to this quantity data. So better mining, those mine sites assigned the way we work now is to assign field agents to work with the cooperatives, collects ESG data, analyze those data, and use those data to develop great value plans that we assign to cooperatives to serve as ways of improving conditions and practices in the ASN site. So this data actually allows you to have that access of information that you can use in different ways. And so, yeah, it's the best option for us, for you, is to, the first option is to have access to data and quality data that better mining will help you with. Thank you.
Thanks, Manu. Very interesting. So it's quite interesting that both on the formal side of things and on this sometimes informal side of things, access to data, collaboration, and of course transparency are sort of like key points. And that was some challenges I think to that and some solutions I think. Stefan, on the inside, on perhaps the topic of collaboration, leading a collaborative platform with 11,000 members. Your word is obviously on that topic. So from your perspective, can you offer some insights on the engagement with the African sector, mining sector, in the context of ESG standards, and perhaps also tell us a bit more about collaboration opportunities, what the challenges, obviously opportunities that you see.
Thank you. Let me talk about the collaboration between 16 OEMs. It's already difficult to not to talk about 10,000, which is more distant. But as a background, we run with CSR Europe an initiative that's called between 12 years, drive sustainability, which started with 5 automotive companies saying we want to have common message to our suppliers, and we want to assess our suppliers to tier 1 together. That was with 5 companies. It grew into kind of much wider initiative with now 16 OEMs who are there. Still this element of common message to suppliers, common guiding principles globally, common assessment of tier 1 suppliers, etc. But with more ambition towards impact. And that's an important element, I think, with all those regulatory frameworks, be it the battery regulation, be it CSR 3D, with everything that came to companies in the last years. What is the impact that it will have in more sustainable source? Because it's not, and that's the first thing, it's too much seen as only compliance. It's not a compliance. Compliance is important, I understand, but it's about how do you get a more sustainable supply chain, and how do you get your partners in your value chain engaged with you on that. And if I may say, Johannes, I don't know if you see that evolution, but while 10 years ago, automotive companies would be more in a distance and say, please meet this requirement, new supplier, which is tier 1, tier 2. Now it's more on how can we engage more. The movement is towards how can we engage more and closer to even the raw material sourcing. So that is I think the name of the game and the challenge, I think, of drive sustainability in general and all the CSG standards is how do you make that in an engagement model? How do you bring that forward? Because it's a way to manage risk. It's good to have a level playing field, but it's about impact and positive change. That's the first thing. Where do we see that, especially in the interplay between African raw materials providers or based in Africa and the downstream companies like automotive, but also others? First of all, it's about indeed that I'm not the best person to talk about that. I think it's about quality of the data, of the questionnaires, but it's about the quality of the intelligence that is provided and this intelligence that is shared. And you mentioned raw material outlook. And one of the things that automotive said, we don't have a good view, or individually we are trying to have a good understanding and a good view on how is this value chain shaped, who are the players in it, where are the risks, etc. That's information you can share, that is intelligence that you can share. But the same thing and the same challenges about what are the policies and requirements to promote exposure on the upstream value chain. How can that be shared? Sometimes now that's still too individual, we try to harmonize that, but someone said earlier, and serving the cats, that's something that I use it. But it's something I use since many years. It feels like working that, but it's important to work with cats in this case. So because it's about in a lean and efficient way to get the intelligence in and to engage on that intelligence. The second challenge I think is linked to that. Too many of these requests are different, slightly different. You are an upstream player, you get questionnaire A or B or C. How to align on that and the raw materials outlook helps on that. But one of the work we are doing with sector associations, and I see from the Global Institute, and how to get aligned on the standards, etc. That's still work that needs to be done, that there is a more unified, less but more unified standards. That works too. So that will also decrease the burden of upstream. Then the last point I want to make is more on the upstream sector. Downstream, there is a lot of collaboration, I think. Upstream as well, but not so much. We noticed in work we were doing with automotive companies in the upstream, also here in South Africa around manganese mining. Individual constituent of mining companies. One of the things I learned there is the loneliness of large-scale mining. Those general managers of the mines, they are really high sustainability periods. They do the work. They manage profit and environmental impact and social impact. But they all do it alone. Mines next to each other, they do not work together. How can, and they are a bit far away from the downstream. That kind of bringing together, I think, is that this is the first challenge.
So that's very valid points. Now, I think what we would be seeing is obviously the importance of data access, the importance of collaboration, the importance of participation, and ultimately equipping participants, not only in the African market sector, but obviously globally as well, and the, let's say, the earlier tiers of the value chain to meaningfully participate in enabling downstream operators to use different kinds of applications in that regard and participate impact in that way. One additional element is that, of course, this conversation for a long time has been held principally in the context of human rights, and the early days of responsible sourcing / due diligence is very much about conflict risks and child labor risks, forced labor risks, etc. And what we've seen, of course, with the onset and the prominence of the climate discussions that we're ultimately getting to, is really emerging to topics of the human rights side of things, social side of things, and the environmental side of things, and to ensure that we sort of like tackle that crucial part of the discussion as well. I'm very happy to have David here as well, because David, you can very competently speak to the practical challenges of emissions data collection, which is of course that critical complementary data point that ultimately we'll be looking to roll up into the battery concepts. And perhaps you can just provide some perspective on on carbon and GHG disclosure contrasted with carbon footprints, and just provide some insights on that. So also in that the opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm happy to share some sort of engineering nuts and bolts insight into the challenges that the greenhouse gas aspect of the regulations is going to require on the part one disclosure. It's a mammoth task. It's a difficult task. The greenhouse gas regulations require that the battery greenhouse gas footprint is disclosed on the battery itself in terms of kilowatt-hour, kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt-hour of the useful battery lifetime. And it's a life cycle approach. So it's, as we say, mine to market, and in actual fact, it's post market as well, because it includes an aspect of end of use and recycling. So the challenge from the point of view of the OEMs is to first of all understand what those supply chains look like, who are the actors in the supply chains for materials that go into their batteries. So we mentioned earlier, abundance. And then overlaying on top of that, understanding what the greenhouse gas impact is of the materials that go into the battery. And whilst a lot of organisations in the supply chain, certainly ones that we've engaged with already, are fairly familiar with the sort of what I call the traditional greenhouse gas footprint in type of activity, greenhouse gas protocol kind of approach. This is different because it's a supply chain approach and it's for certain parts of, for example, the manufacturer's throughput. So whilst we can draw a circle around an operation boundary and say that's the greenhouse gas footprint in that particular operation, that could be an organisation that's manufacturing hundreds of components, and only a small fraction of those are actually going into the battery we're concerned with. So the challenge that we're finding, and it is a challenge, is the allocation of the greenhouse gas footprint to a particular product or a particular component. So that's really important, and the ability of an organisation to actually provide that data essentially boils down to the system that they have in place and current information that's available to be able to break the greenhouse gas footprint up into those various different components and like those. So that's a challenge from the point of view of the OEM. I understand what that looks like. And then the disclosure requires that the greenhouse gas footprint is then further broken down into 4 specific categories of the supply chain. So raw materials, sourcing, and processing one. Then there's everything pretty much down to the middle manufacturing up to the point of the battery going to the vehicle. There is distribution of the finished product, and then there's the end of life aspect, so the recycling part of it. So those also have to be broken out and represented as a percentage of the overall greenhouse gas footprint. So that's what the OEMs are going to be expected to actually produce for the battery passport. So there's a challenge for those guys. Now, that then obviously is going to be resulting in an equal challenge for the members of the supply chain. So all of those individual companies who are involved in any way in the supply chain for the battery are obviously going to then be asked to disclose data that will enable those calculations to be made. So yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. What is the life cycle of greenhouse gas footprint of the product, but it's certainly one that we're diving into head first at the moment, and we're discovering as we go along. So it's interesting.
Thank you so much, David. It's very, very important points there. So I think we've heard quite a bit about the challenges. Some we alluded to some of the opportunities. We're going to deep dive into that now. But fundamentally, what we're seeing is that there is regulation coming through, and the battery regulation is obviously only one of the many sets of regulations that are coming through. You mentioned CSDDD. There's obviously a lot of energy at the moment behind labor regulation in the US, particularly around forced labor questions, and what that means, what compliance with that means for access to key markets. Now, in order to manage those risks appropriately, many companies downstream found themselves in a situation where they needed to understand the sub-tier composition of their supply ecosystems. And a lot of the leading OEMs have actually worked with us over the last years, since about 2018, on meticulously mapping out, sometimes through audit-based processes, their entire sub-tier supply ecosystems, because the old days of ensuring or making it the contractual obligation of the tier 1 supplier to do a lot of that work simply don't work, or that unfortunately doesn't work anymore in today's world, where the responsibility ultimately extends beyond, and also compliance with regulations depend on quality data and data that has been obtained with full integrity to inform whatever compliance declarations ultimately the covered companies have to undertake. The other element that's there is that with that insight into the supplier ecosystems, obviously extends all the way down to the mines and actual raw materials manufacturing business. Came that need to increase capacity, to increase knowledge, to ensure everybody gets onto the same page. And as Johannes already alluded to, there's some tools, etc., that have been developed, and many, from a culture point of view, quite a few OEMs also moved away from looking at and performance supplier as a potential risk, and as a result, an automatic blacklisting or delisting of it from the supply chain to we need to actually support and work with and engage with our suppliers. And of course, that's also where inherently there's a lot of opportunity that sits with players, not just on the continent here, but globally. We discussed collaboration, the need for collaboration, without lots of agility. So of course, there is that need to collaborate, perhaps collaborate way more on the mining side of this. One aspect as well, of course, is that one has to ensure that we do meet the timelines that they are given in the legislation, and that we sometimes as leaders have to put an example out there and commit to doing something simply to demonstrate to the rest that it can work, and then bring the rest of the industry on. We've discussed you need to include the ASM sector and not to marginalize particular stakeholders, of course, in the implementation of the legislation. And overall, now we're getting to the point where there's a lot more data that is going to be generated. David's point is obviously pertinent in that regard. But when data is generated, it also needs to be processed. So management systems need to be upgraded. Your internal reporting capabilities need to be upgraded, etc. And of course, finally, we're getting to the point where all of this is ultimately rolled up into a battery passport. And so the critical importance that we select in between, so comparing in the end, all that many of the things we want to look at is the actual passport, but the data behind the passport is obviously critical, and all of these processes ultimately will inform a good enough passport that ultimately can stand up to scrutiny. Now, this leads us to the opportunities really, because of course there's plenty of opportunities in this topic, and I wanted to start again, actually start with Manu in this context, and look at what is really the pathway here for the essence. So please do give us a brief sort of overview of your opinion on that.
Thank you, Jenny. I would quickly go back to maybe about 10 years ago, when the government acts consumer protection policy was enacted, and it triggered various reactions, both from downstream and upstream actors. The immediate reaction from downstream actors was to kind of distance themselves from materials that originate from DRC and adjoining countries, which tremendously affected ASM operators. Businesses closed, but we did not necessarily protect the end users from the risks attached to those materials. Because some companies closed because businesses could not continue in that region. From upstream side, there has been a significant smuggling of materials that enter the global supply chain. So that was the first reaction of the behavior. For instance, we disengaged, but we did not solve the problem as the global community, as industry. Then some industry members slowly came back in the DRC. I think about 2 years later, maybe on 2013 and 2014 to try to support initiatives to implement 3D supply chain and to mitigate risks on the supply chain. That didn't generate a global or a holistic approach to handle this situation. So some members here present maybe support better mining to mitigate, help them mitigate risks on the physical supply chain, but then the rest of the problems remains such. And so I think that it's a holistic approach with the contribution of all of us to tackle the problem globally that we need here, because the risks can switch supply chains. You solve risks of tight labor in mine sites, in particular mine sites, using better mining expertise. You get quality data on, presence of children on mine site, but then they switch to another mine site if there is also no support to the other mines. So I think it's global support, and we need to generate efforts in supporting corporates and engaging with members of ASA miners that are affected by these risks and also generate risks.
Thank you for that very interesting insight there, Manu. Very important to keep in mind. I think one that will probably also come back to the Q&A. Johannes, Mercedes' perspective on impacts of ESG commitments on African mining strategies for engaging suppliers. What are your thoughts on that as it relates to the opportunity side of things?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to point out that I don't call it cat and carrot, but that's certainly something I'm taking away from this one. It's an interesting question. It speaks very much to our ability to drive conservation rate and drive success with what we do. I think once again, it's not just answer the formal requirements. I think we've established now on the panel that this is not the ultimate solution. It's still an important piece of doing the homework. And what I give as an example is our code of conduct, which we redrafted in 2021 and it's wonderful. And usually what it was, and this is what most documents of us would look like, it's still 4 pages of 25 requirements, and which actually say don't do that, right? Our new document is actually 3 pages long, so it's quite a bit, and not just in terms of requirements, but in terms of the explanation, in terms of offering guidance, how to do things, in terms of stating expectations that are currently not by but will be in the future, so just to let everybody know what's coming. And then what we expect here also is a bit of a trickle-down effect in the sense that we expect our suppliers to forward these requirements to their supply chain. And that is an interesting layer of the supply chain, because with the tier 2s and tier 3s, we're hitting companies that are large in other ways, but have what scales need more sustainability based. I think it's absolutely important to bring this size on board. And in some cases, talking about stick a little bit to get a reaction and get a discussion going, because that's what we want to have at the end of the day. These things, not set contract revival requirements and then be done, but it's used in the action direction and it's already pointed out. In addition to that, I think there's no way around OEMs for the mine directly. On different levels. This is partially why we are here, why we are sitting on stages to make ourselves visible and to drive the action forward. And there are more in-depth ways to do that, of course. Part of that is our work in standards, initiatives where we work together with mining companies to set standards, about how standards can be enrolled as effective due instruments. That is a very big point. And then in some cases, it makes sense to go deeper. And I think this is the area where there's the most room still for development. What I mean is strategic partnerships that go beyond the usual commercial relationship that we have to have with also mining companies. And to give an example, we entered into a strategic partnership with North Africa at the end of 2022. And then last year was mainly about really getting to know each other, so understanding each other's businesses. And I had the pleasure to with their bauxite mining and aluminum production facilities in Brazil, to really get to know how they operate on the ground, right? How they treat biodiversity management, how they deal with deforestation, how they interact with communities that are affected by their mining operation. And that is very much foundational to then define something in response, and also to assume a shared responsibility between body and animal, looking at the entirety of the supply chain, which I believe is still something that you don't really see a lot, but that may hopefully, become a more common practice going in. So that's what I'm looking forward to. These non-conventional partnerships that are really driving out.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you. It's very interesting. I have a follow-up question on that for Stefan, but before we go there, to pick up on the climate discussion, David, on the expectations on upstream and particularly regarding climate quality, to deal on where we're early. What are your thoughts there? What are the opportunities? Where is this going to go?
It's a good question. I think if you look at what the end point, what the desired outcome, the motivations for the regulations, the new regulations that we asked for. The intention, I think, is to help drive decarbonisation. That's what it's all about. That's what the greenhouse gas space really speaks to. And what the passport will do is it will provide a window or a series of windows you can look through to understand why the impact of various factors of the supply chain. And a window on the overall OEM battery. Okay, so that's the first thing. So there's a degree of enhanced transparency, perhaps, that should arise as part of the regulations. Remembering at the same time that one of the aspects of the regulations is to attach a performance threshold and a series of performance bands on battery performance itself in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. What that's going to look like, we're still finding out. But I mean, you can imagine the parallel of your multi-colored sticker that you get on your refrigerator that you buy. Class A efficiency, class B efficiency. So something akin to that. So it's tempting sometimes to think about these kind of interventions as basically as a regulatory stick, but I think it's a carrot as well, to coin a phrase. So it will enable organisations to position themselves as low carbon members of the supply chain, low carbon service providers. And in that way, they will become the supplier of choice compared to others, general terms. And that's important, not just from the point of view of being a low carbon supplier in a particular supply chain to a particular OEM, but I think it's also important from an outside perspective as well. Become the corporates talking to the outside world. Over the last certainly the last 5 years, we've seen the conversation shift towards what are the stakeholders, what are the shareholders, what are the investors asking of companies in terms of greenhouse gas climate? What they're asking is, what is your plan to transition to a low carbon economy? That's a very difficult question to answer. And if you look at, and it's a difficult question to back up with hard statistics as well. So if you look at the 2022 CBP disclosures, there was something like 4,000 companies that stipulated that they have a low carbon pathway, but less than 0.4% of those companies were actually able to provide any kind of indicators to back that up. So there's a gap, and I think this kind of transparency in supply chain will help it spur organisations to fill those kind of gaps.
Thank you, very insightful. Iain, moving on to you. Now, you're obviously leading the discussion in many strategic forums and directly with various companies on the battery passport, on developing battery passports, machining battery passport. Tell us more about the actual passport, and of course, perhaps explain a little bit, how is it linked to practically meeting expectations, demonstrating compliance, etc. And where's the opportunity at this place?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I just had to laugh because, being an adult, I actually have my real passport with me. And sometimes when speaking about these sort of abstract digital multi-value chain encompassing concepts, it's very easy to get sort of a little bit lost or being less tangible than an actual book. So I think the opportunity that the battery passport presents is that it makes it graspable. It makes that path from a downstream OEM, sometimes through 8 different steps, depending on the raw material, back to that one mine site producer in some country on a different continent far away, much more tangible. And so yeah, maybe a little bit more on the passport itself. It's still a work in progress. There is ongoing work defining rule books, defining indicators, looking at the best methodologies. There's some agreement that one passport can actually be compared with another. Nonetheless, it's going to be a QR code that's fairly clear that you can scan, and you will get, like with a real passport, a depiction of the journey that those raw materials have taken. I think that makes it a lot more transparent than what has been sort of missing in the past. I believe Stefan was speaking about this. Companies know their direct suppliers, but once you get to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and beyond, it becomes very sort of vague and unknown. So I see a lot of opportunity for companies to join initiatives, basically to start implementation. We're seeing that with early adopters now, and not only downstream companies, but also midstream and upstream companies. And to talk a little bit more to the points made by Johannes around this areas for cooperation, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for upstream producers, like those attending the conference this week, to really look to partner with global initiatives where you can start learning what does that mean when Dave comes to my mine site and does a product carbon footprint of my specific material as it pertains to battery, to an end battery point. But also, what are the due diligence requirements? How can I position myself as mine site operator with data that's readily available in a format that can be compared and shared? I think this provides tremendous opportunity for the early adopters and the first movers to actually demonstrate their kind of progressive and leadership position. So yeah, the passport is a hot topic. It's here to stay. But I think that whilst the scope of the legislation is very much the downstream economic operators who put those batteries on the market, we will see, and we are seeing, more legislation going in a similar direction. I look to other developments in the Americas, in Far East Asia, and beyond. So I think it's not a question of whether, but rather when. And so the adoption to join these undertakings, to start collecting that data, to make sure that this data can be connected out to a real battery passport, it's a fantastic opportunity. and put you in contact with many more members of focus value chains, which I think is a very useful forum for not only, let's say, compliance, but I would say many opportunities beyond that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So be interested in also related to your guide. Stefan, pretty much everyone has mentioned the word collaboration, which I believe is critical as we collectively sort of navigate this sort of like next stage or next version of responsible sourcing and integration. Do you want to just add a little bit more perspective on that from an opportunities point of view for the active mining sector, how to operationalize that, and perhaps also what it means to be an industry leader in that regard, what your expectations would be for how a leader would act in this regard. So, move this on.
Well, thank you. First, I want to. The problem with the regulation that is coming, battery passport, regulation, all these regulations, they are very individual focused. And I think what Manu pointed out is the real risk. All this individual focus that the lawmakers put into it, is strictly for the regulation. Makes it an individual requirement of each company. What we see happening in the wider group of CSR companies also from other sectors is they are very good at the compliance part of it. It gets into the ethics and compliance in all the type of finance, etc. And they become very yes, no, oriented. That's the real risk of all this individual approach. You try to find the real approach, you don't wait for anything, but that's it. And especially when there is civil liability involved, it becomes kind of yes, no, shall we get out? And although the conflict regulation of both sides have shown that that is not the case. So we need to do better as companies, I think, than the regulator in this case. And you asked about what is leadership? Leadership of the Europe in general is three things. Get your house in order, do the things yourself, have the policies, have the actions, follow through, etc. That's one thing. Second is to lead a leading company engages in collaboration. You mentioned strategic partnerships. I think that's the way to go. You engage with your peers, with your competitors, within your value chain, to create this kind of partnership. And the third is you need to engage with stakeholders. For car makers to go into a mine is new. They sit in their head offices, where the profits certainly not close to mine companies. They need to go every time we try to say building and bring it. It's good that they are more very understand. Here, this about this engagement piece that is very important. Because only then all this regulation will become more than a kind of due diligence exercise and a yes, no type of engagement with the support. So yeah, that's the main point I want to make. I think the other bit, and I will stop there so we find the proximity is the new name of it. Proximity within the value chain. Make this partnership. We engage with the sector association. We engage with specific projects as car makers. We bring the car makers with. That's the real thing, the real challenge, and the opportunity, because then you can leadership comes out of those elements of collaboration.
Thank you so much for that, Stefan. Very, very good point. So to briefly summarize before we move into Q&A, of course, we are on the hour, but feel free to stay behind and ask questions. We will go a little bit over. But what we heard here was the ASM feeds are a reality in many supply chains, particularly if you look at the micro supply chain where a lot of the industry micro from Russia is no longer available, and as a result, we're seeing shift of sourcing to Madagascar, for example, where all micro is produced by ASM. So it's Manu mentioned the need to work on the sites and to assure those sites was critical, however challenging. So that we equally have to invest in a holistic complementary process in order to bring the entire sector obviously forward. We discussed the opportunity of strategic partnerships that are available now with OEMs for mining companies in that field. And one way of doing that is to flag good behavior as a mining company. There are various responsible mining standards out there. Many of them are by now supported by various OEMs as well. Undergoing an audit, for example, to flag that you are pretty much quite far along the way in your own kind of like journey of conforming with that standard. Ultimately helps as a good argument to perhaps advance that strategic collaboration opportunity. So looking at this mindset shift of supplier versus potential strategic partners, I think very interesting for the other constituency over here. We also discussed again in data. I think the emission side of things is so critical, and the investment into the ability to generate that type of data, to generate the competence within the business to actually speak to these areas of inquiry that no doubt will significantly increase in the future. And David's team is of course there to help. Iain very nicely, I think, framed the battery passport, not just obviously as a transparency tool, but ultimately also again, collaborative kind of like opportunity that exists there. And crucially, look, it's coming down the line. There is a lot of activity in that space right now. The GBA has, for example, has been leading a lot of the discussions in that field, but engaging Iain's team around what is it, how can I be an early adopter / how can we familiarize myself with what's practically involved in this is a worthwhile discussion to have as a mining, as a trading company, or as a very downstream company that makes some constant here. And then, of course, Stefan, I think you made very, very important points there around the collaboration and how proximity is so critical. The idea that we have a lot of laws with a lot of purpose now, and to translate those purposeful laws, let's say, into an actual impact on the ground is one that will only really materialize if we do have that stakeholder engagement in place. We do have that collaboration beyond just the kind of direct industry and business relationships. So thank you for those very, very valid points. And yeah, we want to open it up briefly for some questions. Camilla, I don't know if the online audience has already asked questions, but otherwise Camilla has a second microphone.
I will put this on.
Well done. So if there are any questions for the panel, now's your chance.
Oh, thank you very much.
This is our piece.
Oh, my name is Sonny Butega from DMT KB with kind of background in consultancy firm, in mining consultancy firm, Johannesburg. No, first I thank the panelists. This has been very enlightening. It's great insights into the efforts of decarbonization. There are just two small things I wanted to just check out. There was an important example given to what governments can do. For instance, considering companies within the same proximity doing things differently from the other. I was just wondering whether with your work now you've probably had a scan or looking having some guidelines what resource-rich countries can look into in terms of legislative support or legislative provisions in order that you collaborate effectively. The second one is another, by the way, one is on what support does the financing world give towards the development of this passport? Will it affect? Are they supportive? Are they providing sort of guidance, or say we will rely on this tool to support certain projects in mineral resource areas for development along the value chain.
So thank you. So we have two questions there. We'll briefly answer those two questions, I believe, and then we'll do another round. Iain, on the second question as relates to the investor community, is that an area where we've seen quite a bit of action?
Actually, surprisingly, not so much. But I think in general, the financial industry is looking more and more to real data. So in the past, they relied on aggregate risk data, when it came to understanding and investing in certain projects. And in the last couple of years, I've seen it move to much more granular data, meaning not, let's say, bauxite production in West Africa in general, but for one specific site. When it comes to battery passport, the onus is on the economic operator. This means the battery producer times it means the OEM, and sometimes in a complicated kind of mixture of fruit, depending on the interpretation. But basically, both battery producers and car makers are the ones that have primary responsibility to create the passport. I think, however, and those passports, by the way, being made available to regulatory bodies, so that's the EU that needs to check compliance. They will also be made available to individual consumers, and of course, they will, to some degree, it is partially visible to the manufacturing bodies throughout the passport itself. So it's still to be determined as to what extent financial investors, etc., would have access to what level of information. So it's the early stage.
Yeah, that's very good. Now, on the question of governance, obviously governance being a key stakeholder. Stefan, perhaps you brought up the stakeholders in the earlier discussion. Do you have a particular words you want to say on the role of governance in that regard?
No, I think thank you for the question, because I think it's an excellent question. Because at least what we see from a European perspective, the legislator stops at the moment they make this law saying these are the requirements and this is what we expect. And then they leave it to the market, the individual companies. And I mentioned earlier, it's very individual the way the legislation is made. One of the things we try to bring in, and for example, the European Commission's setting up speed in a scattered way, maybe a little bit. And there is a role to play in making the change possible. If you want to achieve something with that legislation, namely more responsible sourcing of a battery, then you need to put more in place than just an individual oriented legislation. And therefore, your question comes together with the finance. Who is going to finance the collaboration? The individual companies need to do it. Yeah, but there is something like a dilemma of collective action, meaning, am I going to pay for all the others, the free riders? So their government, we see it coming with the global paper, maybe has a more role to play for the moment than just putting out the ball. So the particular question is very pertinent. Also, and that plays at the local level as well. We did in DRC projects around local sustainability methods of mining processes. Government needs to be involved, needs to play a role in it. It's a bit to the back. But it is a
Absolutely. I think we're going to go to two more questions and then later stop at 2:15. I see there's 2 hands up.
Since both Nick and Iain referred to the Global Battery Alliance, I wanted to use the opportunity to just quickly raise our hands. So Iain is the executive director of the GBA. And maybe not so much a question, but more an observation that I wanted to share. We talked about how do we make this battery passport more of a box to gain exercise, but a tool to really drive meaningful change. And we talked about expectations from regulators, governments, and industry alignment. But I just want to share an observation from the work that we're doing right now. So there's a very clear set of expectations from civil society and NGOs as to how this instrument is going to affect change along the value chain. So there is a lot of work to be done to negotiate what does meaningful impact actually look like, what does civil society expect, what can companies actually implement, how does it interact with the standard landscape, and how do we then have actual insights to try to change, right? So there's no real shortcut or quick response to this, but it's really painstaking negotiation and consensus building exercise. And many of our members that are here today are involved in this. And I just wanted to highlight that there is no way around doing this in a multi-stakeholder forum from our perspective. And there's different forums where this can take place. But yeah, if you have any questions, we're also here. RCS as a member, we have multiple members here, so please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Please keep your questions short so that we have more time for the responses. It's very typical, what it is.
Good morning, my name is Nguéyanouba. I wanted to ask around the considerations coming out of COP28 and the issue around justice in decarbonization, because in this conversation I hear a lot about the greenhouse gas and that it's sort of an E aspect to this conversation. But when you look at it from a value chain point of view, especially in Africa, the requirements that you guys are asking for are going to be difficult for the people who have and for the social licenses for the minerals that they need within one of the mineral batteries. And also, what is the nature conversation? Because we all kind of realizing that the concentration on climate alone is part of the reason why we're not making progress. At least in the development goals that we have. So yeah, what are you guys doing around that space? Thank you.
It's a very important
Yeah, thanks. Super cool question. I'm not sure I can really answer that fully, but what I can explain is that a lot of the drive or the ambitions that we formulate as a company towards our supply chain comes from taking on this responsibility as an actor in that transition process, right? Because we are fully aware that every electric vehicles require different and a lot more raw materials than what our traditional portfolio would have. And in that sense, we are fully aware that there is a responsibility that we have to bear and we need to move into the mineral space. Again, this is why we're here today. And this is why we're working with standards. This is why we're setting requirements that are mineral specific. And all of that comes from the awareness of the role of minerals in that transition, right? So I think in a lot of ways, it might still be early days to really see the impact of that movement. But from my point of view, and again, going back 3 to 5 years, so much has really fundamentally happened in terms of changing the value system and really pushing the border of what companies are actually comfortable doing. And that I think we've actually come quite a long way already, and I do hope that this in due course will trickle down also into the surroundings of mining that takes place in Africa.
Just to add to that, something that is, and my colleague Manu has outlined the work we've done engaging artisanal and small-scale mining communities. So it's really important with the Dodd-Frank legislation that this, crazy disengagement at scale without a whole bunch of Excel sheets to the essential universe without really changing much on the ground. And it's part of why we're engaging with the GBA. And the GBA has spoken about this from the beginning. You just pointed out the civil society participation, but do not exclude ASM. ASM miners make up over 14 million people around the world. If you take their dependents, we're talking about 150+ million people. With the huge push for electrification, we're actually seeing more and more need for artisanal mining. So artisanal lithium mining has popped up in the last couple of years due to the major around this. So one really interesting aspect is that artisanal mining often has a lower CO2 footprint per output and a higher grade of mineral output. Now, if you were to engage those actors and not punish them and exclude them from the value chains, but actually get them on board in the ecosystem, then you have more value reaching those communities. So it's a slow process for sure, but it's really about, I think, making sure that they're included in these kind of, these global undertakings like a battery passport, because when those actors get recognition and are formally included in the ecosystem, then you'll see more value contributing to those communities.
Great, thanks. That's very valuable. That's been a great question. So we are now on the top of the hour really. I just want to leave about 15 minutes for people to actually be able to ask questions informally and sort of in more networking context before we integrate the actual menu. So hopefully this has given you a lot of content for our discussions. If you do want to get in touch with us, please do come seek us out, reach out, there's some contact cards, etc. And exit. But yeah, thank you very much for your attendance this morning. The breakfast was delicious. And yeah, feel free to continue this conversation outside, take in the news, and have a successful rest of the conference. Thank you all. Thank you very much.